A lot of you have noticed Dabo Swinney at Clemson. He's been talking a little bit, talking about everything from how his opponent shouldn't be in the playoff, through no fault of theirs, of course. It's not an Ohio State thing, it's just a playoff thing, it's just a principle thing, to the fact that he could be governor of Michigan. You could argue whether either of those are valid or not, but I will say this. I'm not sure why you guys don't understand what he's doing. Why is this a surprise to anyone? Maybe if you just arrived in the college football world 10 minutes ago and you don't know anything about anyone, and so you're just developing a first time perception of people, okay, maybe you're looking at Dabo Swinney and you're saying, oh, you're saying, that's a Jersey accent, even though I've never visited there coming out. Maybe you're looking at him and you're saying, oh, he must be a guy who talks a lot. Well, if recency bias is all that you're basing that on, yeah, he does talk a lot. But think back further. Do you remember when they first came to this dance? Do you remember when Clemson was brand new at the college football playoff table? They played Bama in Arizona, then they played them the next year in Tampa. But do you remember when they used to be an underdog in these settings? That's what I'm trying to get you to remember. It wasn't always the case that Clemson showed up and they were the favorite. They were the prohibitive favorite. They're favored by a touchdown. In some places, a little bit more than a touchdown against Ohio State this Friday night. That was a different DNA. When I say DNA, I don't actually mean the way the program was wired. I mean the way it carried itself outwardly and the way that its leader, Dabo Swinney, carried himself outwardly. There has been a diametric opposition that I've had to one thing Clemson does over the years. I've spoken about this a lot. I don't think I've spoken about it this year. So a lot of you are new to the show, so you may not have heard me talk about this. I always have to preface it the right way because it sounds like I'm trashing Clemson, and I'm not at all. There is an approach that Dabo Swinney takes that I don't personally buy into. So the approach is this. The approach is allowing the key source of fuel for your motivation to be doubt, and allowing the key source of fuel for your motivation to be an underdog mentality. I don't believe in that. Not because it doesn't help you win. It does help you win. Obviously, it helps you win. Check out where they are right now. Check out where they've been. It's not that it can't help you win. It's not that it doesn't get you fired up. It does get you fired up. Absolutely. Clemson plays with a massive chip on their shoulder, or at least they have in the past, in moments where they were an underdog. When in the world have you ever seen them in a big game where they were an underdog underachieve? They may not have always won, but they've always overachieved, at least as far as I can tell, relative to expectation. Why is that? Well, because they felt doubted, because they felt like an underdog. So, of course, that worked. Using that as your fuel, using that as the source of your motivation, it works. It's all well and good in your climb. And Clemson was climbing in 2015, 2016, 17, like even in 2018 when they boat raced Alabama, they were an underdog. And there you go. They overachieved massively relative to expectation. So how could you have a problem with this? Well, here's my problem. My problem's not with what it does for you on the climb. My problem is what that philosophy does for you when you're at the mountaintop. Because here's the thing about that overachievement. Here's the thing about that chip on the shoulder mentality, us against the world, back against the wall. Well, if you're good and you keep getting better and you keep getting more talented and you keep overachieving, win, all of a sudden you do something really crazy in that climb. You get to the top. You get to the mountaintop. Clemson has been there a couple of times, but even when they won their first title in 2016, was it? Yeah, in Tampa. I mean, they were still an underdog. The next year they faced Bama, and the year after that they faced Bama. So as a program, they weren't viewed as having quite gotten to the level of Alabama, even though they beat them one time on the field. But now, as a program, many people view them as equal to Alabama. In fact, after the 2018 game, a lot of people viewed them as having surpassed Alabama. Had Clemson played Alabama in a playoff situation last year, Clemson would have been the favorite. Now, Tua had been knocked out, but Clemson would have been the favorite. Okay, so the perception changed. Well, also, a byproduct of that is Clemson's favored by most everyone they play now. Now, against some of the teams they play in conference, really the motivation level doesn't matter because their talent alone is winning those games. But now you see what happens when you get in a big game against Ohio State, for example, and now all of a sudden you're not the underdog anymore. No one doubts you anymore. That entire fuel source, that motivation source that you used to get to the top, got you there. It got you to the top. Here is the difference in philosophy I have versus the way that Dabo Swinney runs his program. I'm going to save you some time right now. If you're headed to the comment section, if you're a detractor, you are already right in the point you're about to make. And that is Dabo's won multiple championships. I don't even have a team of my own. Therefore, why would you listen to me and my style and my approach to leading an organization over a guy who's proven? If you were going to say that, let me save you some time. It's valid. What you're going to say is valid. That is a criticism that you could have for what I'm about to tell you. But yet I still feel this way. I don't believe in the philosophy of allowing doubt to be the fuel source for your motivation. I don't believe in having your back against the wall, you against the world, all that stuff being your fuel source. Only because eventually if you get to the mountaintop, it's not there anymore. The blueprint you used to get there is no longer applicable, and you find yourself being on top of the world, having to reinvent your approach. If you want to know what's behind a little bit of what you're seeing right now, that's it. If you want to all of a sudden know why Dabo Swinney seems to be talking out of every orifice he has right now, it's not because he's dumb. It's not because he's bored. It's not because all of a sudden he doesn't have a filter. That's not it. Dabo Swinney could talk and think circles around most of the folks criticizing him. That's not it. What's happening is this right here, where Clemson's about to be Friday night in New Orleans against Ohio State, this used to be a spot where they'd be a 10-point underdog or a 7-point underdog. They're not anymore. They're not. They're a 7-point favorite. So all that stuff you used to use for motivation, all that stuff in these big time settings that you used to be able to tell your kids, hey, look at this headline, look at that headline, look at this point spread, listen to this expert. Well, the point spreads all favor you. And the headline favors you, and the expert's picking you. So that fuel source, that source of motivation you used to have, the plug got pulled out of the wall. The gas tank got emptied, and it got filled with orange juice. If you're trying to tell your guys they're still being doubted, and it's them against the world, it rings hollow. Because they're not stupid. They've got an iPhone in their locker. Every time they turn it on, they're told how good they are. They're not told how little a chance they have. Now, if you want to use this, if you're Brian Kelly in Notre Dame, I guess it'd work. But it doesn't work if you're Clemson. Therein lies really the opposition that I have to some of the approach that he's taken. The results so far have paid off. But then again, if I have opposition, it certainly wouldn't be because of what I expect to happen on the front end. On the front end, Clemson's done everything I would think they'd do. It's once you get to the mountaintop, how do you stay there? That's the beauty, and there are different approaches being taken here. Clemson versus Tuscaloosa. But that's the beauty in what Nick Saban's done. You don't really hear that from them. They don't talk very much, period. But when they talk, it's not that. They sound very robotic, and you think it sounds boring. Like it's a lot more fun to get some headlines. It's a lot more fun to hear some bulletin board locker room material. But that's kind of not the way that program has been programmed, and that's because that's just not how Nick Saban operates. It's always even keel, never too far up, never too far down. We're going to operate based on a process over using external factors to fuel us, because if we're reliant on external factors, i.e. doubters, i.e. hate, i.e. locker room material, bulletin board material, what happens when it runs out? Where's our fuel coming from? If we taught ourselves to rely on that, where's our fuel coming from? Well, right now, that is absent for Clemson. They don't have it. They may beat Ohio State Friday night. I'm picking them to win, but I'm telling you, in the lead up, the reason Dabo Swinney sounds so much different is because they don't have that right now. There is no doubt. And so I don't know what his approach is. He may be crazy like a fox or tiger, as the case may be. But I'm telling you, whatever's going into him talking so much right now, you can bet your bottom dollar is directly tied to the fact that he knows he has to have a different pregame approach here, as opposed to what he used to have in these big games. What he used to have is not there. Then before we move on here, if you want any further evidence, remember what it used to be. What it used to be leading into these big games was total radio silence from Clemson. Clemson was being ignored, and they really didn't draw attention to themselves because there was no sound coming out of Clemson. Now, internally, inside the four walls, figuratively, of their program and their football team, well, that's where the talking was happening. But it never got out. Almost to the point where Clemson was kind of anonymous. You knew the Tiger Paw, but you didn't know a whole lot of the players outside of maybe Deshaun Watson and company. Well, now it's the inverse. Now there's sound bites coming out of Clemson every day. They are totally different going into a big game now than what they were like going into a big game back then. And all that is, it's nothing more, nothing less. All that is is Dabo Swinney knowing he's reached a different level in the journey of his program, and therefore he's got to redefine some of what they use in a build-up to get their team ready to do what they're famous for, which is peaking at the right time. And I don't think it's hating because I'm still picking them to win Friday night. Close, but I'm picking them to win.